Hey, it's Lack of Lepers, everybody, aka SCP and thank you so much for joining us today on our call-in show. This is Confic Call-In, and we are so happy for you to join us today. This is a talk show where you can voice your opinion. It's a show and platform dedicated to your voice about the containment fiction space and anything you would like to discuss therein. If we don't have any participation, then it's basically a platform for me to rant for a while and whoever shows up, which today I thank for doing so, Almerduk. Welcome.
Hey, it's been a while.
Yes, it has been a while, and I've missed everyone, and I've missed doing this, and it's been a rough few weeks. Had COVID, that was no bueno, and just the way it is, you know. So hopefully we'll get back to some regularity here. But I appreciate you showing up.
Oh, I think I got COVID too. I never got a test, but I think.
It was rough. My whole family got it, even a baby. Ooh. No bueno. Yeah. All right.
Is everyone all right?
Oh yeah, we're good. We beat the hell out of it, but it beat the hell out of us first. So, but thanks for asking. We're all good. We're all good. All right.
Awesome.
Yeah. What you been up to? How's life?
Well, I've been drinking a lot of coffee. I have to finish a lot of stuff, so just chugging on that. I finished half of my. I have one of those I don't know how to call them. You know those jars that you just drop like hot water in and it makes coffee instead of regular normal coffee.
Is it like a French press?
I don't know how.
Yeah.
There's a name for it in Spanish, which is en polvo, which means something like dusted or in dust.
But anyway, that's serving you well, huh?
Yeah. I haven't been doing much, but I'm trying.
Well, you're a very busy individual. We all know that. So happy to have you around. Thanks for making
that's
time.
An exaggeration.
Appreciate it. All right.
Thanks.
Well, let's get into our local news. We like to start with just a little bit of structure here and talk about what is unique to our space over here. So Confic Magazine, of course, is something we always take a look at. The last few weeks, we've seen a few posts since we've last been here. We've got a tale by an individual by the name Pockabell. This is about SCP, I believe it's 196, which is the Leviathan, which, if you haven't read, is basically just a very large lobster, or crawfish, whatever. But there's a little tale about that. That's a nice read. And then this week we had an interview with a user from the Dank Memes at Site 19 subreddit. The user's name is Shoulder. And this was just a little interview that we did about this individual, Shoulder, who is known for making a lot of memes, sort of like the DJ Cactus of the meme world for SCP, if you will. Excuse me. So that was that's a fun little interview.
Oh, so he's responsible for all the unfunny memes.
I checked out a couple. I thought they were, there's, even if it's kind of chuckle worthy, I think there's some good observations there, like how there was one where you couldn't remember the name of somebody, but give me an SCP subject and I can tell you the 4 digits that associate with it.
Yeah, that's okay. That sounds good.
Yeah, there's a couple good ones in there for sure. Check it out if you don't know this individual. Just a nice, quick little interview. Thank you to Dr. Fern for setting that up and doing that. That's awesome. So we really appreciate that. All right, and then we have been doing our weekly show of just speed runs through the new SCP articles in a given week. You can check that out on our YouTube. That's been going good every week. We've been able to keep that up, so that's nice. And then in case you don't know, what we do prior to that is every Friday night, we usually go into a lot of detail with regards to any of the new SCPs that have been released. This shows up as a stream on our Twitch, which you can see on the screen right now, which I'll click out of quickly because I'm live here. I don't want to have any echo. But you can go check that out. We do that a few hours. And so what we won't be doing is weekly recommendations because we kind of take care of that in that show. What we've been doing lately is making tier lists. I know it's kind of, but we take all the SCPs, as you can see on screen, from the week, and we separate them into categories. These range anywhere from meh to weightlifting the whole SCP Wiki, down to actively lowering the bar. So yeah, we do this and kind of give you our opinion of the articles and kind of a summary of them, so you can keep up because it's really difficult
I
typically.
love how there's like no okay. There's zero okay like a slot. It's just meh or ray
Yeah.
of hope.
Yeah, meh. Yeah, so we'll go through I want to thank Ty that Yangs just showed up in the Discord. Thanks for showing up.
It's me, Worm.
Oh, what's going on? Oh, it's nice to hear from you. How you been?
So
I'm doing all right.
All right. Well, thanks
I'm
for
just
coming by.
college app's coming up, so I'm
Oh.
kind of in a pickle.
Well, good luck.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
But yeah, back to the tiers here. So we just to flesh this out a little bit. The very bottom is actively lowering the bar, which can happen. You can damage the standards of the wiki. We all know that. The next one up is so bad I didn't finish it, which I think is legitimate. Speaking of pickles, if you ate one pickle out of a jar, you don't necessarily have to finish the whole jar to understand that you don't like it. And so this is a category for that. Meh is next. Array of hope is better than average, and then weightlifting the whole SCP. So we do this every week now. We'll kind of put these on the Twitter just in case people want to get a very quick synopsis of what happened.
So what would you say is the best article and worst article this week, and why?
Oh, that is a really good question. Let's see if I can just pull this up because I just posted this. Well, it's not working. I'll tell you though, because I have the picture just right here. You can't see it. I wish I could share it with you. But this was a pretty good week. So obviously I get help. You know, I can't do all of these articles by myself. Harmony helps me out. So she took most of them, and I took the other ones. Oh, here it is. Let's see if we can get it. So this is kind of our dual recommendations. But on the screen here is this week. It was a relatively short week of SCP articles, which is odd. Usually we get upwards of 20 to 30. This week we only got about 15. But the reason for that is because the 7K contest was announced. And so at that point, obviously, everybody turns their attention towards that entry. And so we saw a dramatic sort of consolidation of output on the wiki.
Are you serious that 7K now? Really?
Yeah, we're at the 7K. We'll get to that in the show, but we're there, baby.
Jesus.
Yeah, yearly. It's kind of a yearly thing now, which that's cool. So
It's been like 3-4 years for RPC, and we're still not at
I know.
1K. 1K.
Yeah. I think
Maybe
it was.
that's a good thing, but
It is a good thing. It's just I'm just noting how fucking wacky SCP is at this point. Jesus, that's a lot.
Part of the reason why we go through all
articles.
these articles is to kind of ensure that it is the case that most of these are not very good, or usually a meh. So, for example, in this spread, to answer your question, we don't really have a standout bad one this week. Most of them kind of fell into the so bad I didn't finish it. Typically when the concept is too thin to be spread across the length of the article. But the really, really good ones were one from Lord, I can't say the rest of that name, Lord XVN, something like that. That had to do with a snow globe. There was a 7K joke article that we'll actually look at. And that there was one more. This is Harmony's recommendation that I can't remember. But anyway, these are the good ones. You can always go and look at these and kind of get a quick little synopsis of at least our take of things.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, but the 7K J one was excellent. I'll tell you that. All right, and then other local news. Speaking of Harmony, she was able to go through and finally tag our wiki, which is of course is sort of an attempt to be encyclopedic about what we're doing in the space. And so you can see that on the right side here on the page. Definitely recommend you do that. Tags are helpful. And so what we've been doing is basically going through and doing some new articles in this Confic Wiki as well. As you can see now, liminal fiction, people don't seem to understand what this is. Liminal fiction is really a nod to the fact that containment fiction as a term doesn't quite capture backrooms and liminal archives, and so this term has been around for quite a while, but it really hasn't penetrated into what I guess we could call more of the mainstream understanding of the space.
By the way, what are your thoughts on liminal levers? By the way, I'm interested in this.
Like liminal archives?
Yeah, because I've been fairly involved these past few weeks because there's been big events going on there.
Yeah, I like it. I tend to sort of be a purist, which is to say that I'll usually agree with critics. Welcome, Harmony. Thanks for joining us. I'll usually agree with critics when they say that liminal archives isn't technically containment fiction. same as Tales. They're not really containment fiction in my
Nah,
opinion.
Liminal Archives is totally containment fiction. They follow the fixed format. They're taking all their cues from it.
Yeah,
That's much more important than how much prosy your stuff is. If you're still recognizably following in the same footsteps as SCP, Liminal Archives is absolutely containment fiction, no doubt about it.
Yeah, so here we see a nice representation of the variety that you can have when it comes to interpreting the term, which I think is the point, because a lot of people sort of look at us,
Exactly.
and what we do, and they seem to tend to think that we all think the same way, and that we can't make the nuances between things like containment when it comes to something like liminal fiction. But to answer your question, I really enjoy the Liminal Archives. In fact, there was a contest recently that I got to participate in, the HorrorCon, which I thought was just great. I really enjoyed the entries, and I think, no surprise, I think Almerduk won that one too, so congratulations while you're here.
Well done.
Yeah, somehow.
Somehow, come on. See, this is why I love you. You're so modest about it. I love that. All right. Anyway, so yeah, the wiki has really gotten a lot of activity lately. We've done an article about the blackout of Wikidot in 2002. If you're interested in that, that's sort of resolved now, so we can kind of get a little retrospective on that.
It has also not had a lot of activity lately.
You mean the Confic wiki?
No, I'm talking about the SCP Wiki.
Oh, no, yeah, we talked about that.
Oh.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah, this is just Confic wiki.
I'm a little late to the party, sorry.
All good. Yeah, we're going to talk about that for sure. Speaking of which, I really appreciate the conversation we just had that showed some different positions on basically the same issue, the same question, because all this has now been incorporated into the entry on the Confic wiki for containment fiction itself. And so Harmony's position that you just heard is represented here and fleshed out, and mine is represented and fleshed out. And hopefully this gives people a little more of a heuristic to get to. Not that I think they'll really take the time. But
you have so much faith in that they will actually read what the definition of a term is before they start criticizing it.
Yeah.
That's so generous of you.
Yeah, I'm continually proven wrong, but hey, just meeting them across the aisle.
You can only just keep up your generosity, and if it's not reciprocated, it's not your fault.
Yeah, and so this is a really great tool for anybody who wants to get, because we've seen a lot of more philosophically directed conversations about the term containment fiction lately, particularly on the Twitter and things like this, mostly of a negative, like Harmony's getting at. But this does really incorporate all that. I really appreciate anybody speaking negatively of our project, because what it offers me is ostensible citations that I can incorporate into this, from both sides of the stance and the goal.
Absolutely, so. Please give us more to show that the term is being used out there, even if it's to be critical of it. That's perfectly fine by us. We're happy to be criticized. It's not like it's going to make us stop doing anything that we're doing.
Yep, and it's nice to have that all contained in this one, where there is like a section on controversy, and we can point at tweets now. So thank y'all for that. This is just an example on the screen here of something we've seen recently. This is actually from January of this year, so a long time ago. But for example, this Twitter post says, why on earth does containment fiction include Backrooms and Liminal Archives, two writing sites about liminal spaces and nothing to do with containment? And so this is just a good example of those sorts of citations that I'm talking about. Anybody who comes across these, please send them my way. I love this stuff.
I personally think that what defines the genre, if you think about what defines the genre in general, I agree with the sort of the scenery idea, where it's like fantasy and science fiction end up generally being like similar genres. So I don't really see a point in distinguishing them by the fact of like the time of their setting, I guess. Like, I feel like it's much more important to note down the function of the elements that are in it, and so
things like the format and the tone and the intent and the purpose and the intonations and
the history.
And so
the philosophical underpinnings of all these things are the same.
The lineage as well.
Yeah, I think Harmony's.
Yeah, so
I think
go ahead.
There's the possible.
I think that let them finish. They had a thing. We all cut them off. Let them finish their thought before we go on.
Who's that?
Yeah, I guess it just mean I feel like it's somewhere in between the sort of very strict, because I think you can still say there's such a thing as fantasy and science fiction, but I feel like it's much more interesting to think about the differences in terms of philosophy as opposed to setting and whatnot. And so I think certain things in Liminal fall under Confic and some don't, just purely because Liminal is a site that's very fluid with the way that like stuff like formats are applied. That's how I see it, at least.
Yeah, Almerduk, you were going to say something as well.
Yeah, I think like the existence of some kind of genre or subgenre or niche genre is kind of undeniable because there's a lot of sites that take after the SCP format, and when something as mainstream as Control, you can see like a very obvious trace of inspiration. I think it's difficult to deny that there's a sphere of influence wide enough to consider.
If you've really got to be in your bonnet about calling it a genre, call it a writing movement, call it whatever you want. Just recognize that this is all part of the same organism that began growing out of creepypasta and was given first form by the holders and then by SCP and has proliferated from there.
Yeah, but I think it suffers more from how the term sounds, because you say containment fiction and you think, well, it's about containment, and a lot of SCP-derived sites do not focus on containment. The defining factor is the format, at least the inspiration of the format. And the term, I think, is, well, good. It might be kind of a misnomer that affects how people
no name's ever
perceive
gonna
it
be
negatively.
perfect, right?
I feel like if I were to go back and rename the term, I'd use something like, I don't know, research journal fiction or something like that.
Yeah, but you see, research journal fiction, there's no romance in that. It doesn't roll off the tongue. It's very clunky to say.
Yeah,
Because you have
true.
to, if you want to have a good name for something, it has to be a marriage of functionality and form. Because it has to be something that Confic is such a you can't do, but like Limfic is decent, but Confic is just got that hard C. Confic. Like Limfic doesn't have Limfic. You sound like a hillbilly. Limfic. You try to say, but Confic is confident. Confic is like a sharp, decisive cut of light into darkness. It's just really strong, and I haven't been able. I honestly, like, I would not be upset if someone came up with something that was better than containment fiction, that like got the juices going like containment fiction. I'd be like, let's go for it. But no, like anomaly fiction, wiki.fiction are both absolutely just abjectly terrible in every possible way. Like anomafic, ugh.
Yeah.
Anomfic, ugh.
Yeah,
Anafic,
I mean,
all bad.
You know, you get to the point where no term is perfect.
Wikific has a little bit to it, but it's not.
Yeah, Wikific. That's nice. We'll think about it. But you know, like you say, you can't spell
Wikific's
confidence. Okay. You can't spell confidence without the first 5 letters of Confic. So there you go. But yeah, I have a lot of grace for people who.
No, you can't spell without Confic because it has another C. It has another C later.
Yeah,
so you can't spell confidence without Confic.
The first 5, you have to ignore the the last C.
No. The C is later in confidence, so you can't spell.
Oh, you're right. Wow.
Confidence without Confic.
God,
that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Oof, I'm gonna write that down now.
See, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
That's gonna
Confic is so good.
It's gonna be a tweet pretty soon here. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a lot of grace, you know, a lot of tolerance, a lot of appreciation, really, a lot of respect for anybody who wants to kind of shine the light of this genre through a prism and notice the different colorations that you can get out of it depending on how you twist it, whether it's the philosophical angle or the heritage angle or the strict format angle or whatever. But I don't have a lot of that grace and respect and understanding for someone who just does not want to recognize, I think, what is totally obvious, whether it's what we do,
blatantly obvious,
yeah, or something as extended as something like Control. That this is something. It's something that deserves recognition formally. It deserves formalization, and it deserves naming, even if it's not going to be the perfect name. Every name is going to have some shortcomings to it.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think specifically in the tweet that you pointed out, it seems like they're really cherry picking their criticisms. Like, what even invalidates the term containment fiction by what they described? If they say it's all shared on Wiki, what was even they cite like stupid shit.
Yeah.
Pardon my French. It makes I get worked up talking about people who are ignorant.
Let's
like
go
this.
here. This was something I had prepared for a little later in the show, but this I think fits in what we're talking with pretty well. So this was a recent tweet. So this week, the 1st of July, really, so even the last few days, there's been another sort of explosion of discussion on Twitter, in the SCP Twitter sphere and the places around it, about Backrooms. Backrooms is very firmly planted, I think, into mainstream exposure at the moment, maybe even more so than SCP. And so there's a lot of discussion that continues to go on about it. And this is.
Oh, excuse me, I just burped. I know I'm not. I didn't realize I wasn't on push to talk, and I burped. I don't know if you could hear that, but I apologize if you could. That was unprofessional.
I think you just told on yourself because I don't think we heard it.
Oh, damn.
That's all good.
Okay, I was really self-conscious because it was loud. It's loud. I was like, ooh.
Just to make it consistent, in post-production, I'll go back and I'll add a burp, sound effect for you. Yeah, just to kind of make it. Okay. So this is from Optimistic Lucio, who, I'm not trying to gush or anything, but just being someone who I think is a better example of someone who can be on staff.
Should we ping them to let them at least know that they're being talked about so they can?
No. I think
they'd enjoy that.
I think Lucio would not want to, be wrangled in.
Okay.
I almost feel bad mentioning the name.
I wanted to bring it up because you know that any time that we talk about anybody in the society and they're in the server, I'll ping them to be like, hey, people are talking about you.
Yeah, and I love that. But in this particular case, I think Lucio would appreciate a minimization of their,
Okay, we can let them. We can give them an ex post facto notification.
Yeah, we'll let them know. And this is, once again, like I said, all this discussion, there's a very taught sort of reflexivity in this space where if you disagree with somebody, you technically, you're not supposed to like them or something. I'm not that way. I love this discussion. I don't agree with necessarily what people are saying, and look, for say, this post, for example, but that is very, very small potatoes in comparison to the fact that it is being discussed. That is a much bigger win.
The idea is out there. We've injected an idea, and the idea is we're seeing what over the past year has been obviously something that people have been talking about, and now is being brought out into the fore. We're reaping what we've sown, and I love it to see it.
Yeah, and then once again, though, it's not necessarily us. This thing exists independent of us, which is really the ultimate comeback for anybody who wants to poo-poo the idea because of us. this is bigger than us. It existed before us. It exists without us. It's just that we happen to be the ones who are gripping it, the most tightly. But to Overduck,
this guy's saying some facts. The Backrooms as a concept sucks as like a base of expansion. It should never have done that. The only reason why it happened was because it was in the right place, right time, with the right audience honestly, I feel like internet fame is a big part of it. But I feel like the Backrooms should never have gotten as big as it did without it being in this year. And with this like specific age group and audience,
there's never any such thing as a should or shouldn't. It's just it happened, and it happened the way that it did. I don't know if we should assign like, oh, it shouldn't. You can't really say, oh, this shouldn't have happened because it already happened. It's like we shouldn't. The Patriots shouldn't have been able to beat the Falcons in the Super Bowl, but they came back and they did it.
There was a very, what I mean is more so that what carried the concept into like fame and the mainstream wasn't the fact that the concept actually works as a base for expansion, but because of a very specific and perfect storm that caused it to happen.
I would disagree. I think that demonstrably has a great base for expansion because look how much it's expanding right now.
Mm-hmm.
The expansion isn't good. It doesn't keep in line with the original horror of the theme. Is my issue. It feels people took the back.
But does that matter?
Let me back up a bit, just for those who
does that matter? SCP has abandoned its horror roots. And okay.
Hang on to that point because that's a great one. But just to back up for those who are not watching and listening, let's read this tweet. So some people, this is from an individual named Optimistic Lucio, whose opinions I respect. Some people are saying, well, SCP was also criticized for being a simple concept that expanded. Why can't Backrooms do the same? And Optimistic responds, well, in short, SCP-173's appeal as creepypasta was the implication that this was part of a bigger narrative. And then he goes on to say things like the number insinuates other entries, and there were things about, let's say, Site 19 that insinuated, context and locale. And the thesis of this post and this series of tweets is that that's not quite the case for Backrooms, which did start very nebulously, and then since that point has introduced a lot of SCP-like ingredients into it, which I think touches on Harmony, what you're saying, and also Worm, what you're saying as well.
I think also that base point is dead wrong. The Backrooms, obviously it does the exact same thing. Instead of having numbers, it's plural. The back rooms. It's not the back room. It's the back rooms. So obviously, if there exists the one that we see,
that's kind of a
not
stupid
exist.
interpretation, I think. Because
in the image, there are literally multiple rooms that are part of like the.
Yeah,
image.
and it was never called the back room. It's always been the plural
No,
back
but
rooms.
it's multiple. But like that doesn't imply that there's like different super ultimate back rooms that are like
Sure,
super
but it
cool.
the SCP-173 having different numbers doesn't imply that there's Keter class super soldiers out there waiting to destroy the Earth. You know?
Yeah, but that's completely different. The jump
How so?
from having an SCP that's numbered 173 to a different SCP with different properties that's numbered like 632 or something
Yeah,
is different
so
from
instead of being instead of being a different
there's
SCP with different properties, it's a different room with different
I
properties.
mean, I feel like most people who came across the backrooms don't even know what the backrooms like as a term means at all. People have never even been to like a backrooms because the people who I'll be frank with you, the people who this appeals to tend to be fairly young.
I disagree. I think that it has a widespread appeal because I think that you would be hard pressed to find anybody who hasn't had an experience being in a space where it feels eerie and liminal. That's why, things like liminal posting on TikTok and Instagram and wherever else you look on the internet are so popular.
I don't mean necessarily that the concept of the post of the backrooms is.
1 second. So, Almerduck, I think not to triangulate Harmony here or do some sort of like flankage, but I think Almerduck, you had something to say as well that in response to Harmony's point.
Yes, I did. The term backrooms, as the definition of the term, does not imply that there's like more of them, because when you talk about the backrooms of a building or an organization, refer to like a specific location, and the way the original is written, it implies that the term applies only to this giant space that it's like behind the universe. It doesn't imply that there's more of those spaces. And I guess you can go because the term, I guess you can like interpret it that way because the term is plural, but that doesn't go with how the term is used.
But I think that ultimately it doesn't matter how the term is used in the original. It's what the overall communicated message was, and the overall. I mean, you can just. I think that the proof is in the pudding. If you look at the results of what has happened, we've seen it reproducing into something that's like the SCP Foundation, that's following that fixed format. We've seen it follow the same path. The germination was the same.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of a fallacy, isn't it? Because it's, you know how it goes, like the original... It's kind of a stupid argument, but the usual refutation of the Bible is that it goes something like this, that God exists, and because he exists, the Bible is valid. And we know God exists because of the Bible, and the Bible is valid because God exists. It's a circle.
But the difference is that you can't go to God.com and God2.com and look and see that they're demonstrably and visually the same. You have to have faith in God. You can't go out and look and see and actually have objective proof in front of your eyeballs.
You don't have to nitpick the exacts. I'm
just saying that's what the difference is. You were asking what the difference is, and I'm telling you what the difference is.
Well, let me kind of back us up just a little bit. Worm, you can go ahead and finish your statement.
I feel like the problem is that, like, the reason why I was saying that the people who are permutating on this idea are very young is because the people who tend to write backrooms content tend to be very young. And people don't know what the term backrooms means, and that's why they might interpret it that way.
But I ultimately think that just doesn't matter.
Yeah, with
the concept itself of but then you're clearly talking about something different from what I am. You're saying that the effect that backrooms have had this effect, and I agree with you. But I think the concept of backrooms, as it was intended by the creator, just does not have the grounds for expansion, which is why people change the concept to something completely different.
But if we're going by the creator's intention, you could say the exact same thing about SCP-173, because Moto42 had absolutely no intention of creating a larger multiverse. He just posted it because he thought it would be neat.
Or at the very least,
no, he did. I feel like he did have an intention to do that. He said he wanted to make like one per week or something, and then he lost interest.
But he never followed through. So.
Well, I think if I can interject here and kind of just massage the conversation just a little bit. So I think, obviously when something gets mainstream attention, it sort of carries away from itself and can adapt to new things. And that's really what's happened with the Backrooms. There's a whole post about this on our Confic magazine that it doesn't seem, once again, back to your statement earlier, Harmony, about people kind of discussing things, and kind of warm to your statement about people not really understanding the terms that they're using. There's a whole post on our Confic magazine about how there's basically this infiltration of SCP sort of expansionism when it comes to topics and elements of lore and monsters and things like this that some people would say were not really part of the initial formula of the Backrooms itself. And so I think that's what Optimistic Lucio is trying to say here, which is saying that expanding breaks that appeal. Now, I agree with Harmony in that, these same things have happened to the SCP Wiki, and it's odd to me that such analytics can be directed at the Backrooms and not necessarily at the SCP in the same ways. But I also think it's a little interesting to try to say as an argument that pointing to things, whether it be numbers, whether it be Site 19, which was in the original 173, really has any fertility, potential when it comes to expanding the thing into a bigger thing. The holders had numbers, and that ended up being deflationary, and that ended up killing it. So numbers don't necessarily push you in that direction. And then
why does the numbers necessarily, like, they're pushing a specific viewpoint? Like, why does a number even have to imply that they're more? Why can't a number just be like a serial number or a code?
And if you want to very strictly interpret the fact that there are or aren't numbers, and that having some sort of say as to what should and shouldn't be in your writing project, that would invalidate everything on the SCP Wiki that wasn't necessarily insinuated in the initial 173, and that's a lot of things in the Wiki.
If you don't have an HMCL supervisor, you're not really an SCP.
Yeah, but the holders, you said that the numbers were deflationary, but that's because it was written specifically that there's a cap to the number of articles that could be written for the holders. That's
but you could have made a new series. Well, it's just that the numbers could go either way. It just depends on how you execute.
Well, I mean, if the site and the lore explicitly says that, and it's in the consciousness of the writers for years that there's a cap of, like, I don't know, I can't remember how many, like 200.
I don't think that the holders was. I don't think that it was two. It was only 1 year, I think.
Well, the conversation's a
was when they were actively doing stuff, and then after that, it was just infighting.
Lord.
It's a little more nuanced because there was an initial cap, and then once they hit that cap, they realized they had pigeonholed themselves, and they tried to make a different series that kind of went kind of haywire with the numbering. But there was certainly a sort of dead end and interruption in the momentum that cap on numbers had. But anyway,
there wasn't. I don't think you can say that the numbers were used in any ways in any way comparable in the original post and in the holders is the issue. I don't think that's a very good argument.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's the only difference is there was no initial limitation in the OP post or in the initial conception, but that seems like a pretty narrow hair to split.
Yeah, I would say.
But I don't think it is. I mean, if your canon literally says you can only write this many articles, and then
I think that's just making a config site and also shooting yourself in the foot at this. I think they fucked up out the gate, and they're why we don't see that anymore, because they did that and failed, and SCP saw that, and
but
collectively
your
as a
point is
community
that,
we're like, oh, let's not do that one.
Yeah, but your point is that numbers can deflate. And I'm like, they can deflate, but they can only when it's used in like this very specific.
There's other ways it can deflate too.
Well, I think both
like numbers don't necessarily. I think the point is that numbers aren't that expansion is not the only possible way to look at it.
Or to say that numbers
is not the only possible implication.
Numbers aren't the only inflationary force. It doesn't have to be something like a number. It could be something like a potential idea with enough fertility to expand. Something like what the Backrooms did, like in reality. But I think this response is interesting too. So this is from another SCP author replying to Optimistic Lucio. And this one says, for those who are just listening, not going to lie, this may be a hot take, but I feel like the Backrooms is trying too hard to be read in the same light as the SCP Wiki, with the classification of monsters and numbered assignment of levels and whatnot. It's all suspiciously similar and at the same time whack, which is interesting to me because you can't make that argument without sort of subtly and maybe unintentionally connecting the two in sort of a general, dare I say, genre together?
Telling on themselves.
Yeah. So anyway, as you can see, there is a lot to discuss in this topic. We'll kind of move on since we've been here for a little bit. But there's so much fertility in this discussion as to what
I love it.
Yeah, this is a hugely complicated topic. There's plenty of room for a variety of different valid opinions. This really comes down to a matter of just philosophical taste, I think. So, this is why we encourage discussions like this. It's why servers like this exist. It's why shows like this exist. And it's why, these conversations, typically, unfortunately, on Twitter, shouldn't be reduced to just internet arguments, which we all know what those look like. We should instead be sort of encouraging sort of a distribution of ideas when it comes to this kind of stuff, because it certainly has the necessary complexity to justify those things. All right. Any closing statements about this section of the show?
I don't think
All
any of
containment
that is
fiction.
hot take, about the Backrooms. I've heard so fucking much over it. I remember the first time the Backrooms concept went, viral. This was exactly my criticism. And hearing it repeated so many times, preceded by, it's kind of a hot take, or, I think that it's not original. It's the obvious conclusion to drive. I don't know why people think
People need
it's
to stop
original.
announcing that their takes are hot and just let the take stand for itself,
Yeah.
and we can see what the temperature actually is.
Right. If it's hot
Yeah,
enough,
honestly.
it'll be incandescent enough on site. So, okay.
Yeah, don't if you have to say it's a hot take, it's
Yeah.
you're probably reheating it.
Yeah, you're probably helping it out just a little there. All right. Okay, so moving on, I do want to announce one more thing about our local news, and then we'll move on, because this is a great little discussion that we've had here. But IndieCon is the first independent containment fiction writing contest that we're hosting here, and it was supposed to end at the end of June, but just a lot of forces sort of coalesced at one moment, and so we extended the deadline. That's going to be for another week. I think it's going to end on. Somebody help me out. It's going to end on the 7th now. Voting is going to begin the day after
I
voting,
think.
and the 15th, and then so the winner is going to be decided the 16th. All of these entries are in the Discord. At some point, we'll probably make them public, but I kind of want to honor the people who are, bold or whatever enough to be here and sort of let this contest be decided by these people in the server.
Coolios.
Yeah, that's right. You can't come in. So anyway, but
You are actually allowed to come in. You can come in whenever
yeah,
you
you can
want.
come in. It's no problem. But whoever wins, obviously, will be given prize money, and then of course their article will be posted to the magazine, so everybody can read it that way. And then we'll sort of trickle out the other ones. We'll skip this. I wanted to kind of show myself. Go read my blog. I was very productive these past 2 weeks, talking about how author names are sort of not what they seem when they show those at the front of the page and stuff like that. I do want to definitely take time to read a message that someone was kind enough to leave us in the last week and was hoping that we would read on show. So this is a message that I got from the Discord, and this is by an author named Cherry Boy Writer. And so the Cherry Boy Writer writes this. I remember last podcast that you had on 2 guests who argued mildly about inserting transgender issues where they don't belong in SCP fiction. I remember that one person had said that arguing against it is a dog whistle, which Cherry Boy says is true. I actually came across something called the RPC thanks to East Side SCP and didn't realize how deep that slightly old controversy was. My thought then was that I also remember feeling like the SCP logo in rainbow colors and thinking it was bizarre, but as I got caught up on lore, I realized that it isn't really that difficult to do. It wasn't really that conflict internally there at all. And so the point of Cherry Boy here is saying that the Foundation's narrative has in fact changed, that it isn't really a shadowy MTF and O5 dictation to the world's course of action without its consent. Cherry Boy references this excellent SCP-3241, which at the bottom of it, this is by Great Hippo, I don't know if you've read this one, pretty good one, but at the bottom of it, it says, somewhere along the way, this nasty, violent little global conspiracy of ours grew a conscience. Isn't that amazing? So, it's kind of a contrast between
3 sizes that day.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it's true. In fact, I think the best sort of way to dovetail this sort of, way of approaching the headcanon of the site and something like, the political inclusions is exactly what the SCP Wiki did this year, which I thought was brilliant, which is to just do the same thing that other sort of corporations do, which is try to make it seem as though something like a Pride Month celebration was exactly what it is in the real world, but just make it sort of internalized in a pseudo-immersive fashion. I thought that was very clever.
Hippo would be
Finally
so
put thought
fucking
into
angry
it.
if he learned that his quote was used like that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Hippo. I mean, Hippo does sort of. I don't know. I mean, I would just guess. I'm not trying to speak for Hippo, but I would think that their worldview and their interpretation of the Foundation would somewhat challenge the old Dr. Gear's cold but not cruel kind of thing, you know. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's well put in that article without being too preachy. Good article, by the way. All right, so let's.
It's great.
Yeah, we can all agree on that. Worm, what do you have to say? Go ahead.
I guess I just feel like regarding trans issues, I think a lot of people's issue isn't that they're even there, but it just feels super out of place and weird. And it's like if like a show constantly reiterated that like murder is bad, and it's like we know
Well,
this. We know that murder is
it's
bad.
like I
It's
said
really
last time. It's completely a reflection of the culture of the people who came to the Foundation because it was such a welcoming space. You know, you can't fault a community for having things reflective of the people in that community. And
not
so
faulting them
it's
for
not out
that,
of
but
place
it's
because it's perfectly keeping in line, and it's also easy to internalize that the Foundation's doing what other corporations do. You can have whatever pride you want this month, just make sure you keep feeding those D-class into the Keter containment cells.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think that, once again, I think that was just it came about 3 or 4 years too late, but that's the way to do it. That's the way to really sort of ride the line, and I think fix most issues that people have with it. I mean, so anyway, I appreciate Cherry
Just
Boy.
put a little bit of thought, and then you can, then bingo, you
just
have
think
something
about
that
it
works.
first. Don't dive in, and think about it. Give it some honor to the genre. I think you'll be fine. So anyway, thank you to Cherry Boy Writer for that topic and that comment. Really appreciate that. All right, let's take a little bit of a turn here to go to what I call global news, which is just not us here in this server, basically. Just a couple things to notice for people, just FYIs. So this is SCP Foundation files. You previously have known them as SCP Sideshow. They have changed their name. So when you see SCP Foundation files, that's what that is. Okay, it still is that collective of artists. Once again, I think including Dr. Gears.
Unnecessary rebrand. I think that Sideshow is just too toxic to keep going under that name.
Yeah, I hate to admit this, but I thought Sideshow was a really great name. It's sort of got some mimetic punch to it.
They had to take a step back
They
here.
had to, yeah. And so this was, I think, voted on as the new name between the people who were involved in it. So just FYI, I want to carry over as much momentum and success from that.
What is it? What is it called again?
SCP Foundation Files.
Okay, I'll check them out.
Yeah, which I think once again is a step back, but that's okay. It's a necessary step back. It's the right move. So congratulations on that moral victory. And then this is a tweet from SD Lock. Did you know that there is a Daybreak game in the works? Daybreak, of course, is their her SCP-001 when day breaks. Did you know that yours truly, this is Locke speaking, do you know that yours truly will be voicing some of the icky, gooey amalgamates? Because that's what is in fact happening. So don't know if you know that, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to look forward to this game quite a lot.
Ooh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that's a
Oh yeah,
fun
they
little
were shilling this in Volgan's Discord server.
Yeah. I mean, hey, shill away. This is pretty cool. Someone else doing the job like that. That's pretty sweet. I thought this was an interesting post from today. I think it's from actually yesterday. This is from the Liminal Archives Wiki. So speaking of Liminal Worm, we're currently not taking new members on the Wiki site or the Discord, save for invite only. This is to tighten up our canon and keep our community niche and let us focus on the quality of our articles and not our community management.
Damn.
What
I'm glad I got in when I did then. Shoot.
Dude, yeah, but I mean, the balls on this. I mean, these it's sort of the anti-philosophy of something like SCP or the Backrooms.
A bold move, cut.
Best
We'll see if
fucking
it pays
decision
off.
we've ever made, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, this certainly is bold because, we all know that tenuous sort of balancing act where you have to have input, so that you can continue. But, this hopefully was a bold strategy, Cotton. We'll see if it pays off. But I certainly respect the artistic focus here.
Here's how I see
we
it.
did
Here's how
what
I see
SCP
it.
did not have the balls to do, so.
Well, and
Here's how I see it. Right. Okay. Currently in Liminal, like the ratio of Backrooms to Liminal space writers and that don't write the Backrooms is like 1 to like 3. But like the number of people that come in that are like Backrooms writers to Liminal space writers is like 10 to 1. So therefore, if we close it off now, we can stop more Backrooms people from coming into the Liminal archives. That's how I see it.
it's like spillover.
Exactly.
Plus juvenile
It's a
writers
masterful
too.
plan.
Yeah, well, I respect that because one thing that I try to do, and this is just me. I mean, I'm not saying this should be for everybody. It's supposed to be niche, I suppose. But I resent in some ways how juvenile sort of the aesthetics and the direction and the definitions of what quality writing can be on something that has just a massive amount of sun washing and exposure in a bright light like the SCP Wiki does. And so I really respect this because one of my whole things is to try to get containment fiction out of being captive to a 15-year-old demographic, let's say. So this is something that I really thought was more significant than obviously the attention that it's going to get is going to speak for it. So I wanted to kind of amplify this because I thought this was really, really interesting.
It's probably going to kill us like in the long term, but I don't care. I think it's the best for the writing quality and to keep the community actually an enjoyable place to be in. Because what happened to Liminal over the course of like the last few months is that it got way too much attention thanks to like the King Pixels phenomenon maybe, and the people that tend to join because of popularity and YouTube or the mainstream internet is they're young. They're very young, and very young people do not make for good writers, and they do not make for good collaborative writers who have to like where everyone's input has to be good and valuable to the lore of the site,
See,
to the quality of the site, to the
I
themes.
disagree more. Let the kids write. Let the kids write. For every in the long term, I was an SCP for 10 years, and I saw consistently, in the long term, having it you opened to the youth movement made SCP stronger and not weaker. An unbelievable number of the best writers SCP ever had were teenagers or even young or even like older adolescents when they joined, and they went on to do spectacular things. And also, when you have people getting in at that young age, when they get super into the community, they're that much more invested because it's at an earlier stage in their life. So you get people like me who joined at 16 and now it's going to be a lifelong obsession, versus someone if like they join at 26 like I am now. They've already got their interests and their hobbies and what have you baked in. So I think the youth movement is an absolutely necessary part. I agree that the ratio is off right now. We are being held captive by a 15-year-old, making an absolutely disproportionate number of the audience. But to say that the youth movement has no place in containment fiction is complete folly.
Yeah, and I actually agree with that. So
I don't necessarily agree.
Okay. Well, Almadik, why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I have seen. I know what you're talking about because a lot of RPC's best writers were teenagers when they joined too. But there's a big difference between the kind of people that join a niche writing community and the kind of people that join a mainstream writing community. Like, the kind of people that will join because of YouTube and because of TikTok and mainstream, they are not the kind of people that are good writers or that are interested enough to put the time and attention to read the content of the site, because they come from more, how to call them, quicker sources of information like YouTube and TikTok.
That doesn't seem like a very valid reason to me.
No, wait, Harmony, I definitely agree with you. I feel like not Harmony, Alma. I agree with you because I do feel like the people you're talking about are people getting into SCP in RPC by reading the articles and being like, "Wow, these articles are great." People who come here, like I've seen it. They genuinely, I don't think they really care all that much for stuff.
Thank you for the videos.
That's just what I'm talking about. It's the aggregate. 90% is going to be chaff, but the 10% makes going through the 90% of the chaff worth it, because you'll get some of the best content that your site would ever have. And in the long term, you get dedicated community members who will be the foundational building blocks that your community exists around.
I mean, I do think that applies because there's the invitation mechanism. You can join either by being invited or by already having
I think that the way you're doing it is perfectly fine. I just think that I'm not saying that I think what Liminal Archives is doing is a brilliant checkmate move to take decisive action and do shit that other communities only talk about. And with Lepers, I think it's a very decisive, very interesting, bold move. But my point that I was making is that to say that to write off young writers, to 15-year-old writers, even 14-year-old writers, to 18-year-old young to early teens, as not being capable of producing stuff that's worth the while and not being capable of growing into excellent community members, I think is a completely incorrect assertion
let
to
me
me.
let me step in and
Young writers and youth writing has been such a huge part for so long.
Yeah,
Let me
let
and
me
writing
agree
in
with
general.
that.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so it's while I resent the sort of I would say maybe a little less sophisticated, a little less distracted aesthetic directions and decisions of what something like a younger demographic would bring to a project, I don't also agree that those individuals should not be able to write, because this is sort of a selective process where the people who are really into writing, I think, are going to sort of find themselves inwards a little more so than those people who come from more superficial, more fleeting, more sensation-based exposures to something like the media elements of a writing project. So I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing that young writers are able to come in, and I think it's actually a great thing to get them started at a young age. I think they'll be better by the time they're older. But I think it's just as important, sort of like a balancing act, to have people who've been there before, to maintain very, very difficultly, very arduously, those ideals and qualities that have been there all along. And that's really the trick. That's really the balance of letting people in, letting new voices in. There's always going to be a new generation that challenges the status quo. That's just art. But it's important, I think, and something like, unfortunately, the SCP Wiki, in my opinion, has lost sight of. They've really lost the plot. They've lost track of that sort of counterbalancing traditionalism, some sort of conservatism. That's kind of a dirty word, but some sort of conservatism when it comes to balancing out what would be taking the project into an identity crisis. And so I think with liminal archives, it's respectable. Like I said, we'll see if that plays out. But that is not a completely laudable thing, in my opinion, for the reasons that Harmony is saying. But I do think that in this space, it's a very unique thing that we don't see a lot of. So it's just interesting to watch all this happen. That's just to clarify my thoughts on the issue. All right, so moving on. So we do have the 15th anniversary of the original SCP-173 happened in June. This is the SCP Wiki having basically an art sort of contest for this. I didn't really follow up on this. I don't know if anyone else did. But I guess I thought it was cool that they're doing this again. Kind of reminiscent of the art celebration for 173 when they took the image down in February. But hey,
yeah, didn't they already do this?
Yeah, so this is like this is the hub, scpwiki.com, whatever, 173 anniversary hub. And so it's got its own little CSS. It's very cool. There's a whole little section about this. It's a little more of a celebration. There's a redesigned collab hub that we know of because of that image removal. But yeah, so it is very similar to that. I'm glad that the removal of the image didn't happen on the birthday. That would have been a little strange. But yeah, so I mean, this is cool. I mean, I don't have a lot to say about it, but I just think it's a nice little gesture, and I haven't really checked it out, honestly. But if you're a big fan of 173 reimaginings, which I am, I probably should be checking it out. Give it a peek. Pretty interesting. And then the biggest news, really, from the SCP, as we kind of teased a little bit, is that the SCP 7000 contest was announced. So first we had this page. I think this was probably mid-June, late June. Yeah, it was the 1st of June where it showed up, actually. And in late June, we had this announcement, which was the actual contest, and we were given the theme, which is, as everyone knows by now, luck. So what do y'all think of this theme?
Good theme. I don't know.
It's very cool.
It doesn't light my world on fire, but it's a good theme.
It's so funny because behind the scenes, everybody has been pining for fantasy, I think, as a contest sort of theme, and they thought it might happen last time. They thought it might happen this time. It didn't either. Sort of a little bit of a
they should
blue
save
balls.
that for SCP 10,000 so it
maybe,
means something. Otherwise, if they blow it on 8 or 9, then everyone just remember the fantasy one as being like, oh, that was the peak, and then 10 is where it all started going downhill.
Yeah,
because it's a trick when you jump from something like double digits. It feels like a threshold's been crossed.
Mm-hmm. Well, the good news is we'll only have to wait 3 years.
Oh my God, we're gonna reach 10 in like 2 years.
Exactly.
Fuck.
That's what I'm saying. Dude. They have to start thinking about that shit now.
Yeah, they want to
Holy shit.
Yeah, pocket their boosts. You know what I mean? Like, you got to use them tactfully. Too soon, Junior kind of thing. From Fast and Furious.
Yeah, if you play that fantasy card too soon, that's really gonna bite you in the ass in like a year and a half.
Yeah, you gotta.
When you go to 10K, like what the fuck do we do for 10K that tops fantasy? Fuck.
That's gonna be some sort of jolt, a defibrillation kind of clear move that they're gonna have to do at some point. So, Anyway, so yeah, I think it's a good theme. You know, I mean, once again, a good theme is just vague enough, but just directive enough, just prescriptive enough to bring out some ideas. And it's just funny to see how luck is just like something like mystery or nature. Like these are all things that are already just peppered all over so many articles of the SCP as it is, and so you just sort of focus on it slightly more than usual. So I think it'll pan out pretty well. I am not excited to see the sheer weight, the sheer number of contestant entries that we're going to have this time. Though.
Oh no, we're doomed.
We're going to get crushed in our.
Honestly, at this point, SCP contests are too big for their own good. Like, how is someone going to read all the entries and go
exactly?
I think this one should be the one that gets the votes.
Well, they can listen to the weekly collapsible and listen to us torture ourselves by going through every single fucking one of those bastards as they're posted.
Are you going to go through every single one of them? Seriously?
You bet your ass we are. We're going to we're gonna die. We're gonna die. It's gonna be more than 100 entries, easy.
Keep in mind we've sort of given ourselves an exhaust, given ourselves an escape in the sense that we do have that tier that says too long I didn't finish it. So technically that should be because the article's not good enough. But we'll see. We have to live.
If the article doesn't hold your interest, the article's not good enough. Doesn't matter what kind of fancy prose they throw in 10 chapters from now. If your novel sucks at the first 10, if your novel's turgid for the first 10 chapters, I'm not gonna fucking force myself.
Yeah. I don't have to eat a whole jar of pickles to get that I didn't like it. I can just eat one and be fine. There's no secret waiting at the bottom of a jar of pickles that's gonna make me love it.
Yeah, but, you tell me there's a cherry down there. I don't believe you. I'm not doing it. Actually, no, I would eat the pickles. I fucking love pickles. But bad metaphor for me. But
I do too.
I feel you.
But yeah, so
what time are we going to read all of them? By the way, I'm interested now.
So we do this. We're
going to be reading them on the weekly collapsible.
Yeah, a couple months now. We've been going, and I tried to do this by myself for a while, and I almost
he's being
died.
generous by saying I come on the show sometimes, and Lepers is the one who does all the hard work.
Yeah, no, that's not true at all. I appreciate you being there. It really means a lot to me because at least mentally, Almer Duck knows. We had a conversation about it. The prospect of reading so many SCPs in a given week is not for the faint of heart, I think. But yeah, so every week for the last
it's a torment.
Yeah, it's bad. Every week for the last 2 or 3 months, we've been going through every single article that has been posted to the SCP Wiki because it's just so infamously difficult. That's kind of the point. The function and service of the show is to catch people up because it's impossible to stay caught up with basic general ideas of what these SCPs are. And then, of course, we can't help ourselves. We give a little bit of a review. But that happens on Friday nights at 7:30 p.m. CST, and it usually goes for about 3 hours, 4 hours.
It's a jolly good time.
Yeah, and they're all on the Black Lepers YouTube channel. We also have a Twitch channel, SCP Meta, that has those on there for however long Twitch keeps videos around, which is like 2 weeks. So
can't you save so they stay archived?
You can, but you have to pay. And so I just transfer them over to the YouTube as a permanent home.
Okay.
I mean,
as long as I just want to make sure we aren't creating lost media here.
No, it's all good. I'll save it. But I do want to point this out. So ever since the 7-Con was announced, typically what makes the show very difficult is we get about the average is maybe 20, 30 articles a week from the SCP Wiki. Most of those are not good. But this week, there really has only been 2 articles posted since we finished our last show, which is insane. And actually, both of these articles, I think, are not doing very well. One is -1, one is -2. And so it's just amazing to see how quickly the SCP, content-producing sort of groups will sort of... what's the right word? I kind of think it's like the shoreline receding.
It's a screeching halt. They've pumped the brakes.
Yeah, tsunami's coming or something like that, or like something sort of...
It's like a car revving its engine at the starting line.
Yeah.
Yeah, everyone's preparing their entries for the 7K.
Vroom, vroom.
Exactly.
Start your engine.
So this has been quite a drought, which is cool. I'll take a little break, but anyway, so there's not a lot coming out of the SCP Wiki these days. But you better get ready. It's going to be a massive storm coming through to that one. This is one that was posted since the announcement that both me and Harmony thought were excellent. We talked about on that show. It's a little bit of a joke article. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yes, this one was fun.
Just to mention it briefly, just in case you haven't seen that, I certainly would recommend it. It's the only social experiment, Jay, that I think does a good job, that I think actually is a good social experiment. All right, and so let's move along. We are getting to the point where we need to wrap up, but we'll extend it a little bit. I do want to go through some Twitter takes. This is SD Lock. Currently hosting editions for my SCP-7000 team. Reply with your talents, list of achievements, availability,
Auditions,
and blood type.
Who does he think he is?
Well, so this was really kind of a joke.
Send me your location. Send me your credit card number.
Yeah,
okay.
Some
So
people are like,
this is a joke tweet. You're telling me? Okay. Phew.
so ostensibly,
I was
like,
about to say
no,
whoa.
nominally. That's my point. Nominally, this is a joke. But if you think back, Shaggy has done SCP-5999, which was really sort of a conglomerate author effort. And the same thing with the last contest, which was SCP-6500, which is, once again, this sort of like super banned, this super corporatized sort of authorial effort, And so I don't know how much of a joke this actually is.
Is this like a DJ Cactus, I'm a god, upvote me joke where it's not actually a joke and he really thinks that?
Exactly. So
I don't think so.
Yeah, we'll see. Interesting. This was something posted to Twitter that I thought might get some comments. This is the Backrooms Wiki.
This is so fucking stupid.
So this is a real thing that some of the authors, once again, another amalgam.
What is that? Is it a mouse pad? Is it a scale?
It is a bath mat.
A bathroom mat.
Yeah,
It
so
says
like the bathroom.
Oh. Sorry, I'm on my phone. The caption is very tiny on this screen.
So that's what this is, and it's a real product you can buy. And so I actually looked at it. It's on Redbubble, and this is sold by Harry Blank, the author. The author Harry Blank, SCP, designed and sold this. It's $25, and you can get one delivered to your luxurious gold-armed Victorian-style bath with modern farmhouse aesthetics.
I still think that the Bathroom Wiki's article is mean-spirited, but selling a bath mat for it is clever. I can't deny that.
Well, it's actually more than that.
Get your slave to fluff the pillow for you.
Yeah, it's also available on a throw pillow. It's a poster. It's a
t-shirt.
So
yeah, they did the whole red. Okay, so they're really selling out here. Wow.
Yeah, and so it looks like Harry Blank is doing this with a lot of things like Site 43, other logos. But I think the funniest part about this was that I saw that
it's about time they started to figure out how to make some money off of this.
Yeah, I know this is really available for a long time, but I checked out the reviews because it has this bath mat just apparently is really great. And in checking out the reviews, I'm not going to make a definitive statement about this. I'm just going to kind of plant a seed of doubt. But it looks as though these are paid for bot reviews. There's not one person here who says something in any way specific to the actual product, and I can't imagine that 38 people would have bought this and reacted this way. None of them have any names that we would recognize in the SCP space.
Are there bought and paid for, or they're bots that were set up by Redbubble?
Yeah,
which definitely seems like a company that would put bots for this
or
shit.
Somebody else. Yeah, you can always. I mean, you don't have to be the person who owns an account to buy bots for somebody else. Even if you want to sort of sabotage them and then point out that they have bots. I'm not doing that here, but I just kind of feel like I don't feel like these are real. That's just my.
Yeah, they see something sus about those reviews. I want to go. Now, I didn't even know that Redbubble had reviews. Now I want to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
That could be a fun thing to do. Read obscure reviews, like things that you don't normally even check the reviews for, like Redbubble products or what have you.
People like the bath mat. It's a real high quality bath mat, so it's perfectly at home in your bathroom. I guess.
It's so loud. It's so loud.
All right, and then this one is by Lieutenant Flops. And then this one really goes back to something we talked about a lot the last few weeks. Well, I guess last month's. Admin Bright, and it's misstated here as Author Bright. I guess that's just for clarity. But when staff banned Author Bright for 10 plus years of sex abuse, one of the first questions was, what should be done with the character? Informed by the amount of community members who still enjoy the character, I initially thought the most favorable outcome was reclaiming it, and then Flops goes on to say that this was, in hindsight, incredibly foolish, considering the circumstances surrounding the character's continued adoration throughout the community, and just how weird that is. Flops is now advocating for sort of a distancing between the community and people who will cast the character Dr. Bright so as to prevent, I suppose, this sort of lingering discomfort about this whole situation.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Fuck him. Let's forget about that guy. He was a loser.
I agree. The more the character remains famous, the more you're feeding like minors into that man's influence sphere.
Yeah,
That's not
because
a good
you know,
idea.
if there's still popular content, he can still leverage that to find people to be like, oh, I'm the guy who did that character, that one SCP character everyone's heard of. Yeah, that was me.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah,
get you
because how
can
do
start a
you
lot of
spread the
conversations that way.
information that he's a sex abuser, a sexual abuser, as far as the fame of the character? That's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's just because that news is so new to so many people, unfortunately, versus the Bright character has been with the SCP Foundation almost since the beginning.
Yeah, and the inspiring tweet that
Really unfortunate.
Flops was
Super
responding
unfortunate.
to was Liren, who previously was Azamo, I suppose. I hope that's not a dead name, but I think they just changed their name. But anyway, so the initial tweet was by this individual: "Can we please just collectively move past Dr. Bright as a character? There's way better characters out there. They're still attached to the 2D author avatar of a sex pest." So, this is just, I think, an interesting discussion to do because it really raises more philosophical questions than we have time to go into here. But the relationship between an author and their self-insert, how distanced, how dissociated really is that author with that self-insert. Of course, that touches a lot of other conversations, about practices on the SCP Wiki too. But I just thought that was interesting. This is another tweet. This happened a few weeks ago. We saw a bunch of people run into some Series 4 slots on the SCP Wiki that were suddenly available because I think somebody deleted their articles. I think actually
Oh my god! Oh, this is a tale as old as time for SCP. Yeah.
And this individual, Rat King, says, "You guys are such damn savages when it comes to people removing their works in the site." And so this was like, you can't really tell maybe on the screen, but these were posted, like, two of these were posted 1 minute after one another, and then the other one took, I think, looks like 9 minutes to show up. But people are so just voracious about previous numbers. And unfortunately, as we saw, if you
Back
watched,
in my day, we called this slot sniping.
slot sniping, yeah, it's a good name for it. And unfortunately, it's a bad practice in my opinion because what you ultimately end up getting are things that people really weren't ready to post, but who will make compromises with the quality, the polish of it, in order to get that slot, in order to snipe that thing.
I think that is the outcome that happens. I think it's also balanced by they get so much more attention because it's this older slot. It stands out,
right?
So if it's shit, it's gonna have that much more daylight to make it wilt and melt away.
Yeah. Well, it's ideally, I think obviously I'd rather the art
ideally
itself.
that's how it would work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't. It doesn't always go that way. Yeah.
All right. This is a tweet from Rounderhouse. In case you're wondering how the SCP Discord is going, the official one, of course, the half of the mod team that has been inactive for months have decided finally to use their power to argue for why they shouldn't be removed for inactivity.
A tale as old as time. I remember back in 2019, I was arguing about this for SCP. Yes.
Once again, a tale as old as time.
Yeah,
Holy crap.
I mean, it's unfortunately, I hate to say this too. It's almost like sniping the positions. It's almost like when you get a position, that's what's important. It's not really the content. It's not really the effort inside. It's unfortunately a lot of positions on the SCP
Titles
Wiki.
and offices.
Yeah, really, there's sort of these like sinecure positions that people just sort of like to put behind their name, like some sort of degree that they got. They can suddenly put a few extra letters behind their name or in front of it.
What was it called in Ancien regime France, where you could buy your way into having a title or something?
Ooh.
Venal privilege. You can.
Wow.
It's like venal privilege.
Wow, that's a great phrase and word. Thank you. Yeah,
I know, isn't it? Yeah, venal privilege is when you buy a position to have a job. That's basically what they're kind of doing here. They're doing it for the status, for the clout.
Yeah. But then again, I did read somewhere else on 05, I think, that the SCP Discord is ready to enter its next phases of exposure, that is to say advertising. So they may be in for a little swift kick in the rear if they're going to be on staff. It sounds like they're going to have some more work to do pretty soon here.
Sounds like they're trying to manage it like they managed Site 19. It's not working.
Yeah, well, I guess...
Because Site 19, it was fine for half of the mods being active, because who goes on IRC, but...
Yes. Well, I think it's got to be seen as an improvement because this is another conversation, but, obviously Discord doesn't dox you, doesn't hack your IP address,
yes.
your email address that you're unaware of, that you're giving to people. So I guess it's still an improvement.
I'm not saying it's the wrong move. I'm saying it's definitely an improvement, but the problem isn't the move; it's the people making the move and treating it like business as usual.
And then this is another post. Once again, Optimistic Lucio, who we appreciate. This is we already talked about Admin Bright, so this is kind of just right down the shelf. from that. But I want to bring everyone's attention. This is Optimistic Lucio speaking. I want to bring everyone's attention to the Jackrabbit incident again, and how she easily spun a narrative against people she disliked by using this community's tendency to believe accusations at face value, even without knowing the person in question beforehand. And this is really a call to avoid that. So I really just wanted to, I guess, clap for this. Because that's really what I was trying to say in so many ways and in so many places. That is a real crux, I think, for a real problem for the community and how it tends to get into trouble and get other people into trouble.
Yes, can
Absolutely.
I go now? Please,
please.
do not interrupt me.
Go off.
Wake the fuck up, SCP! Like, holy shit! Everyone is looking like outside of the community. Everyone is like thinking, RPC is the enemy, or now it's Confic is the enemy. But they blow this out of proportion so much. Like, when you get down to it, RPC is the size of a single INT branch, and this is a fucking LARP magazine. The enemy is not outside.
Hey, we are not.
The enemy is inside, taking advantage of the community. It's the people who are like getting into positions of power by manipulating socials and exploiting that to abuse people, to either emotionally or sexually. That's the kind of people you should worry about and you should look for, not the mysterious villains who left the community and are now criticizing it.
The evil
Fires coming from
Argentinians
inside the house.
control the world by the fucking shadows.
Yeah, and
Yeah, because it's so easy to look at other communities and say, oh, they are the enemy, they are going to dox us, they are going to... And make this into a month-long, like... I don't want to say hate campaign because that would be stupid, but like focus all of the antagonistic energies of the community towards that.
It's a smear campaign.
I guess so. Like, you should stop like focusing on that. You should start looking inside and seeing at the problems that are within the community.
yeah.
Because SCP is insanely toxic. There are few communities that are as toxic as SCP. I can only count like a few Tumblr ones, maybe like My Little Fucking Pony, but there's a lot of problems that should be addressed and are not getting addressed and have never been addressed because there's always some mysterious outside antagonist who can be pointed at.
Yeah, that's a really good way
That's
to say
definitely
that.
what's been for the past 4 years.
America conspiring against SCP.
So, I think there's some silver linings. I think this tweet, for example, got a decent amount of exposure here. And it's just nice to see people. I mean, Optimistic Lucio, for example, is on the staff, so it's just nice to see people in somewhat actionable positions who seem to be starting to turn the ship. You know what I mean? In some ways, this is a great Twitter thread. I recommend you read this. This is from June 18th. But yeah, it really says a lot of the things that we're talking about, Almer, that you kind of say. I don't know if it goes that self-examining into it, but it really is refreshing, I think, and a healthy thing to see this sort of juxtaposed with what was sort of the status quo a few years ago, which was that this wasn't really seen as a potential red flag. People were just sort of hungry hippos, sort of gung-ho about diving headfirst into ego praise and things like this. So.
The cynic in me believes that this is not going to go anywhere because like people tend to do this once in a while. They say, "Oh, we have an issue. That's terrible. We should do something about it."
Yeah.
We don't.
Yeah. So
They never do.
They never
It
do.
takes like years, and they never do.
I don't. If this doesn't do it, I don't think anything will. So now's the time. If not now, when? This has nothing to do with the conversation we just had, but this is a DJ Cactus post, and I just wanted to kind of point this out as something interesting. This was from sort of mid-month. It says, "This is going to make sense to almost nobody who follows me, but big news, I was elected to one of the 10 positions on EVE Online's character player dev council. Legitimately have been working for this for like 2 years, so it's pretty validating. I just think it's cool to see people who are in our space sort of crossing over to other other places and other spaces. I always like to see what other people are doing, whether it's something like
Eve
communism.
Online, huh?
Yeah, so like this is interesting, a little crossover. It's nice for me to see communism will win, like doing noise music, like noise art music. I think that's pretty cool. I just like seeing people's extracurricular stuff, and so it's nice to see when people are doing well in those things too.
You're like a fucking school teacher, Jesus.
He's just so proud of everybody.
Even Cactus, way to go, man. Good for you. And then this, I think, was probably the best tweet of the time that we've spent away from one another. This is Metaphysician, and this is from a few days ago. And Metaphysician says, "I hate CSS, format screws, and other fluff. Just give me the bare text," which is singing to my heart right now. Sure, a picture or two are nice as well, but not necessary. I hate feeling like I'm expected to do those things or get involved with massive promotional projects. I hold nothing against those who use it, but I just want to tell a story, not keep up with trends. Damn.
Please,
Actually,
God,
Yeah,
yes.
sorry.
Go ahead.
I actually have something to say about this. Liminal. I had a conversation with someone in Liminal about images because, according to some people there, like Liminal and Backrooms is very focused on images, and it's like, what the fuck? We're a writing site, not an image fucking congregation site, man. We're not supposed to. Like people, there was a big conversation about whether or not we should have like, fucking images that are like, in the, that are CC, right? And they're like, oh, if you don't have images, then you're removing a big part of Liminal. And it's like, but we're a writing site. If you don't have images, you're supposed to make it up with writing. It's like really ridiculous stuff.
I think images just always make everything better, but to say the be all end all universe is folly.
Yeah, and I just feel like Backrooms especially, the Backrooms Wikidot is very, I'd say, gimmicky. I think in the way that it does things.
It's very.
I think it does come from the younger demographic. But I also just feel like.
Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your words there.
And I don't know. I think I agree with that completely.
Yeah, and I think Plague has a really good kind of summary, sort of like ending point here. So Plague PJP, who I think most people know, later on says, Tanahuni won arguably the largest KCon, which is the 5K, with the base Wikidoc look and no picture. 2 months ago, a new author out of nowhere dropped an article with a blurry picture and the base Wiki look and got top of the month. And so the statement is that good writing comes out on top. So I hope that's the case, but it is certainly, as you were saying, Worm, a temptation that with unless you're checking it, unless you're continuously keeping an eye on it, that will very, very quickly escape its own containment. And there are a lot of individuals, this is really what Metaphysician is responding to, right? There's certainly something there that Metaphysician has recognized to the extent of needing to respond to it. There are a lot of people at SCP particularly, but other places, as you say, I appreciate the insight, who will very quickly lose sight of that. More time will be spent on the CSS. They'll even do things like make arguments from immersion, which we all know is a dead argument from the side of SCP Wiki these days. But yeah, I mean, and then I kind of wanted to pull out the fact this massive promotional projects. One thing that I've learned, and I think that Harmony can attest to as well, by reading all of these articles coming out of the SCP Wiki, that it's no longer the case where you have just a decently fair, decently balanced playing field. You really almost have to have some sort of exogenous, some sort of outsourced third party.
You need a network.
Gotta
Either
have-
you get
yeah.
very good at style or a
You
network.
have to be part of the club.
Yeah. So, I mean, these are excellent points. This is really what I was trying to kind of get back to with something like the Confic magazine IndieCon entry sort of being, as base as possible, which sort of got fudged in its own way. So, shame on me, I guess, for that. But yeah, I mean, this is just a really impressive thing to see. I really appreciate those minds in the space who are, let's be honest, less appreciated in a lot of ways. This is not going to get as much traction as the latest meme game on Twitter or the latest trend post. It's just not. But hopefully what we do here is sort of not amplify, but sort of supplement these things. I really think this is a great statement.
May I be cynical for a moment?
Yes.
This is not the first time anyone has said that. Like, a lot of more famous people have railed against the CSS trends, and It's been like the common consensus is that CSS doesn't matter, the writing matters, and that has been in place since at least 2017. But we still see that, and we still see like articles with emote CSS tend to have more votes. Articles that have like format
Yes.
screw of some kind tend to have more reads, and
Yes.
that's like an undeniable trend, and people still do it, and it's not really going to change because somebody says that. And I think it's kind of an unstoppable tide at this point. It's not going to change. There might be like some kind of movement to do something minimalistic that's going to last like a few months, and people are going to get like a boat starved and they come back to their usual trends.
Yeah, it's a great point.
And I feel like upvotes it goes back to upvotes and popularity.
Yeah,
Like I feel like that's upvotes have kind of poisoned the well in a
exactly.
way.
Yeah, so
Kind of fucked.
we saw
because
this
there's a
with
rating system.
we saw this with the shortest article attempt. This was last year, where the actual wiki structure, the architecture of the wiki, sort of incentivized shorter articles, and this was at a point where the article word count inflation was getting pretty out of hand. And that's exactly what happened there. This is a perfect analogy because you basically had a lot of people who ran into that space to get that sort of new limelight. And unfortunately, it sort of exhausted itself. It's almost like cultural locustry, where they come in and they eat everything and destroy everything. And there's no sense of balance that can kind of replenish and replete that sort of artistic direction, the things that metaphysician is saying. So yeah, Almerduk, I completely agree with you. Unfortunately, I still think it's worthwhile to point it out. And I do appreciate when somebody's so close to home with respect to the SCP Wiki, where I think this is the most, the largest sort of front line for this offense, can get that message to them. But yeah, I think you're right. If you look at something like the 6K, there was a dramatic increase in CSS themery. 30% of the articles there engaged in custom CSS, where previous it was, I think at most maybe like 7%. And if you look
80% of the entire 6K block has the black highlighter theme.
yeah,
I think.
yeah, exactly. That I should say.
Should
That's,
check the numbers, but I ran them.
No. You're right. That was not including black highlighter because I felt like that. You're right. It basically pushes it to almost 100%. And then another interesting stat was that in the top 5, the top 6 articles, they all had custom CSS themes. And Routers, which one, kind of did. It had the black highlighter for sure. And then kind of did some interesting structural transitions into like the Wanderers library CSS themes. So it was a little more justified. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly the case that the visuals are becoming more of a spotlit component of writing or of presentation and performance at the SCP. And it takes a very disciplined group of people and a very disciplined mind to remain focused on the writing. I don't think most people do that. I don't think most people are capable of doing that. And I agree with you, Almerduk. I don't think people are going to be able to do that come the future.
I
Kind
actually
of a
wanted
stretch, but I think this is a good argument for a star system, like a 5 or 10 star system instead of upvote, downvote.
Yeah.
Because when you collapse the quality of an article to a binary, or maybe a trinary if you count like no votes, you're encouraging people to do whatever works, and whatever works like decently, it does enough. Whatever gets you more numbers. And a star system would encourage people to pay more attention to the specifics of the quality instead of the raw numbers. Because consider like 5K, for example. It's considered one of the most successful articles, but the opinions on it are wildly differing. If we had something like a 5-star system, we might see that it's not actually that well received. It might have like maybe a 3.5 or a 4 instead of a 5 out of 5. But
They should delete all the vote data when they
votes,
migrate
we
and
just see the
just
well
leave a
amount
clean
of success it
slate.
has.
Sorry, Almerduk, finish that statement, then Harmony, you'll go. And then I think Worm had something to say too.
No, sorry, that was just I had to get that fleeting thought out, or else it was going to escape from my brain and never to be seen again. So
What was
continue
it?
on. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm done.
Okay, what was it, Harmony? Because I don't think I
I
heard
guess
it.
I was
Worm, we'll get to you in a second. Harmony, what did you just say? I didn't hear what it was when there was double speak there. All right, Harmony's gone. Worm, what were you gonna say?
wait no the what she said was that when they inevitably migrate to a new wiki, to a new website because Wikidot is crumbling around us. They should just get rid of all the vote data
Oh
so we can
gosh,
have a clean slate and have people just build stuff down.
that
Yes,
would
that
That's
is
be.
what
what
I
I
said,
do.
and
Oh my
I
gosh.
still I stand by that. That'd be great.
Oh man, yeah, that was
Yeah, I think
interesting
I
to
agree
see.
too.
Interesting to see the anxiety around that when Wikidot was down for a while. That really, you could almost sort of hear it, like it panned out very distantly, but sort of growing and swelling in the mix. People got really worried about their upvote totals.
Yeah.
But you can't
Kind of a
really do
pathetic thing to be
that.
worried about, isn't it?
Yeah, you can't really
Like
do that with stars, I guess.
if you're confident in your articles, shouldn't they just get back the upvotes back?
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
a very
care.
complicated topic. One I've been trying to talk about for about 4 years. So yeah, I appreciate the observations there. All right, and the very last arm. We're going a little long today, but I appreciate that. It has been a while. I think it's been 3 weeks. So I
Wait,
think
real
it's-
quick.
Go ahead.
I want to ask you something real quick
Oh, go ahead.
about CSS and stuff. You know how on Liminal, one of the biggest writers is Nav, right? Nav is obviously like a good writer, but like Nav and Viz did a lot of CSS, and Liminal, the website looks like fantastic. I think. Like, do you think that there's a problem in Liminal where people are focusing too much on CSS because they're seeing writers like Nav who incorporated a lot of it into their work,
I
and then
can't-
like
Absolutely. I
isn't
think
that-
that's one of the biggest downsides to LA is that people focus way too much on the fucking aesthetics, and it's either on images, which are like the defining factor on whether your article gets like 1 read or 100 reads, and you can make like some kind of unique CSS. You're basically guaranteeing longevity for your article. I think it's a problem, but I don't see any solution for it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, do you think Nav? Yeah, specifically about Nav. Do you think he uses it a little bit too much, or do you think it's like just because people are doing bad interpretations of what he does?
I think he's kind of excessive sometimes, but he obviously has a way better aesthetic sense than I do because he's actually taken graphic design classes. So
Nice.
I don't know. I'm not feel equipped to say
Yeah.
anything about that.
I tend to think that it's sort of like this. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Like so, it's hard for me to imagine a situation where someone has done such a good job writing their actual text, their actual prose, that it allows them enough time to do something incredibly visually impressive. I think most of the time, it's the more impressive the visuals, the more really probably you've underlyingly split your time with writing, with polish and the text. And I see that all the time with the SCP Wiki. I think it's hard to say because I can't answer your question because I don't read a lot of LA, but it's hard to say that on the whole. But I can tell you that with the SCP Wiki, there does seem to be a lot of that going on. So it's just.
You think that maybe it could be good policy for a future Confic site that just you cannot change like some parts of the report?
Well, see, that's what I tried to do with this IndieCon. My initial idea was that it's basically as stripped down as possible. You basically submit in paste bin, right? That was the initial idea, so that the spotlight, just like Metaphysician was saying, is totally on the writing, and you don't have the distractions that can sort of hack the brain, away from quality assessment. But some of it was sort of a complication with the infrastructure. We don't really have a solidified platform that can accommodate different ways of submitting. So that ended up being a little loosened. I think that does say something about the genre. I think that visuals are an important part of storytelling in some ways, but once again, it comes down just to the individual. The individual has to have enough discipline, I think, to find that right balance of what they want to write, and constantly ask themselves if they are, relying too much on the visuals. I don't think that. I think it's probably a little too far to restrict visual innovation, which by the way is very impressive on something like the SCP Wiki. It's just a problem, I think, when it gets to the point where it's very evident that the text could be so much better and so much time has been spent on the visuals. I hope that answers your question. Kind of.
Yeah, I get you.
Just a good conversation. All right, then.
I like that. I like that answer.
Okay. Thank
You give me some things to chew on here. I'm gonna have to think.
It's tricky. I mean, so one last thing to say is that most people don't care, right? Because what I've observed too on the other end of it is that at the SCP, it's not like you can write a really, really crappy article and then put a really nice CSS theme and it's gonna survive. That's not the case either. So the magnification that we're talking in here, that we're looking at, is probably a step or two, an order of magnitude 1 or 2 in more detail than most people care, in the first place. So, I think when it gets to the mastery of a craft, these are questions that you have to struggle with. So I do appreciate you asking those. I think that's a good sign. So, and then the last arm of the show, once again, happy to go over a little here because it's been so long, but the last arm, we do like to take a look at the politics of the space, O5 command, and just kind of see what's going on with this political mecca. So one thing that happened in the month of June that I don't know if you know about was that this happened. So if you visited the SCP Wiki, people thought that Wikidot was crumbling again and that we'd have to run to, Michel Frakowiak or whatever, again, as a savior. But it just so happened that when you went to the wiki, this is what you saw on screen, which is basically just the main page and one word which says placeholder. So what ended up happening, if we go to the new main page, this whole front page of the wiki had to be erased and basically reposted. And this is a message. On June 17th, an unauthorized party gained unauthorized access to a staff member's account and deleted the front page of the wiki before they were quickly expelled from the session and the page restored from a skipper backup.
God, that must have been like a clench your butthole moment for everybody inside the system.
Yeah, and so due to
they could have destroyed everything and they just vandalized the front page. Can you imagine? Oh my God, what they could have done with that access? Holy fuck!
And so that sort of has become this sort of insecurity, I think, that we see kind of proliferating itself. The effects of it are still sort of rippling. It turns out, this was freely admitted, I think the day of, it was actually SCP Administrator Mini-Meets. That account was somehow hacked. Somehow is a loaded word because it's Wikidot. I'm sure there's a pretty easy way to do that. But this is Mini-Meets on their Twitter. My streak of days not having my Wikidot account hacked and my identity used to vandalize the front page has come to an end at 13,340. So that's what happened there. And this was very brief. I think it lasted for about a day. We decided to have some fun with it on our Twitter, where we basically attributed this 001 to placeholder McDoctorate, who was doing another meta 001 with the front page of the wiki. Probably a little too meta, as we say. But other people kind of had fun with it as well. Tan Hody said, "Oh boy, I can't wait to look at the front page of my favorite Wikidot website." And then, more interested people in this said, "Hey, Wikidot, would you consider allowing two-factor authorization on the site?" Which I don't think we'll ever get, but is a good idea.
Wikidot is never going to have any kind of substantial change until it finally dies.
Yeah, that's a shame. That's just the way
it's never going to happen.
Yeah. So that really set off a bunch of sort of security alertness. It's almost like the alert status of the wiki and the staff particularly was raised. Very shortly after we see this O5 citation of an individual whose sandbox appeared to be primed to include a JavaScript input. And so we had to ask and consult some of our tech experts in the SCF. But basically this is sort of like loading a gun in a way, just code-wise. There's so many things you can do with this JavaScript insert that is impressive enough that the staff was surveilling at this degree to catch this. Almost like seeing the impression of a concealed carry weapon in someone's pocket from like 100 meters away. Very impressive. But anyway, so they sort of have focused in on this and have decided that maybe we should investigate this. And so we're sort of seeing this all over the place, with the staff being a little on edge when it comes to the security of their website.
They're nervous because they can see that the winds are shifting, that they're not the biggest dogs in town anymore. They're losing rapid influence to offsite community. Like, they're losing their pride of place in the SCP ecosystem. Yeah, and they're nervous about it. They don't like it.
That may be true. I think it's kind of like saying that the U.S. dollar is probably going to collapse at some point. I mean, it's so thoroughly embedded that it's probably not going to happen soon, but it is inevitable. There's no question. So. Anyways, and then this is something else.
Why? Wait, hold on. Why is he starting? I know it's a collapse of why.
Yeah, this is another conversation for a different show. It's a long story, but basically it lost its peg, and basically people are printing at will. So rampant inflation is going to devalue the dollar. It's not important, and this is kind of a political topic that people might disagree with. So we can choose to answer that at a different time. But something else that happened on the site, at least, that was kind of security-based and interesting, was that finally the search bar has been fixed, has been replaced. So you may know Crom. Crom is a sort of bot, I suppose, from someone, SMLT, and has been installed as of now onto the SCP Wiki site. And so now you can search, actually, again, apparently. I haven't tried it myself. Yeah, so this is now in the site and has taken over as we all know, speaking of Wikidot crumbling around us, absolutely broken search function of Wikidot. So this is something certainly to applaud. This is the sort of thing that we like to see happen from 05, the things that are actually helpful. But in the process, someone got in trouble. In fact, multiple people did. This is just our stand-in because Lucio is, we like to poke at him, I guess, a little bit since he's here. But someone got in trouble for this. This was technically an unauthorized edit, and so this person got in trouble, someone else got in trouble, and
this was all very silly.
Yeah, it's almost like, hey, you won us the game, but you did something that I told you not to do, like in practice or something. I don't know. Like the benefit of this clearly outweighs any sort of slight that may have been made towards the authority structure at the site. This is huge. This is the best thing that's happened since the town halls. Come on. And then
I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't
like
get it.
I see the point, but like, why?
I don't know.
Why so much focus on the bureaucratic side of it? Who cares?
I think it's because of that security breach. I think they're very paranoid about that. That's just my answer. That's just what I'm seeing. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. Maybe they like in a few years they'll say, "Oh my God, that was stupid," and they'll like throw it back and roll it back.
Yeah.
Roll back the warnings and that.
Yeah. It'll take a few years for that kind of honesty to bubble to the surface. But
like with Metaphysician.
Yeah, kind of like with Metaphysician. Yeah, that's a great point. And soon to be, communism will win. I think. I mean, I think I'm on that train. We should start some sort of petition or something like that. Anyways, and then this is speaking of town halls. This is something interesting that happened. I think this morning. This is once again Optimistic Lucio, who I think is probably the brightest light on the wiki. The staff, I think. Once again, not to toot anybody's horn a little too much, but I really appreciate how different Lucio is to the staff. Certainly doing things that people don't want to tackle for a lot of political reasons, I think. So, but this is a suggestion.
It's refreshing to see someone who actually goes and says, "Hey, guys, we should actually maybe do our job."
Yeah, and Lucio was the one who was like, "Hey, that age raise was not about the safety of the users. It was about us covering ourselves." That was bold as hell. So just that kind of stuff. It's just nice to see. And then this one is a suggestions and complaints FAQ. So this is something that they're going to do. It's basically a thread that's on the actual site. It's not technically on 05. Kind of like an 04 post, I suppose. But it is in the town hall's forum section. And basically this is a complaints thread. So as Lucio states, you basically are just throw your complaints at the staff, and they may not respond, but they're going to do it eventually. So I thought this was interesting and kind of, I guess we'll say, brave. So if you have a complaint, go check that out. Be sure to flood that one. In other news, yeah, that should be an interesting thread to read once it's finished. In other news, the public staff chat may be a thing. This is a discussion that happened, finally going the way of RPC, I suppose, and other places where they're making their staff
It's
chat.
not going to mean anything unless they abolish private staff chats entirely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I think correct me if I'm wrong, Almerdug, but I think what RPC does is basically they have some of those areas, but it's more so along the lines of you can't comment on it. Is that right? You can't like respond to the actual thread, or are there actual?
You can, but there's a channel like outside of the staff channel. Have like a channel for site stuff, a channel for Discord stuff, and a channel for everyone else to comment at.
Oh yeah, I like that setup. That's nice. And so this might happen. I think we talked about this a little bit in the server already, so it's a little leftover. But it's interesting. They're talking about going to Discord, making their staff chat public, which would be so good in so many ways because so much has happened behind the scenes. That's really all the leverage that someone like I or Harmony have with our, we'll call it investigative journalism when it comes to staff chats, staff chat logs. If this stuff is out in the open, all those things are evaporated instantly, as is the things that sort of are encouraged by closed-door activities. And then an interesting thing about this is that they plan, at least from this post, to also perhaps even have the recap team, which I think would be evaporated. You wouldn't really need the recap team if it's public, but maybe they still want to do that for people's benefit.
If they don't have a team, how will they know they're doing their job?
Ooh, that's a great philosophical question. In uninteresting news, they are going through with their charter rewrite. Looks like this has moved to another phase that no one really cares about, and once again, that's another reason why that suggestions and complaints thread that we saw just a second ago came about, is because really the staff have been in their own little world for so long, they feel like it's a good time to try to listen to what has been going on around them. And then just the last thing we'll mention, just a sort of nod and salute and tip of the hat, is that Mr. Jacob Conwell, who's been around for a very long time and who recently was made an administrator, is entering into medical residency. This is a step that all physicians have to go through. It's
well done to him. He's been at this for. I remember when he was like starting med school.
So long ago.
Good for him. I'm really proud of him.
5 or 6 years ago.
A long time ago, yeah. I've known him for many years.
So I work with medical residents all the time.
Good for him.
I'll tell you that it is just a completely all-consuming thing. So this is probably done with a heavy heart, but Conwell is someone who I think we all have respect for, who I think was a reasonable voice on the staff in the position that he was in, and certainly wish him well in his profession. Just take it from me, this is absolutely a necessity. There's absolutely no way he can do this thing called medical residency and have any participation in the wiki. So this is probably best for the site. All right. Well, that's about it. We've gone almost 2 hours, so I really appreciate the engagement. This has been fun. I want to kind of open up the floor one more time to our participants here and see if y'all have anything else to say today.
I think it's kind of funny that it took them like 4 years to copy what we have been doing since forever in RPC, and it's not like the first thing that they have copied from us. I think it's an improvement, but it's funny that they're doing it like after us. So like
should write about it.
They saw that what we were doing was superior.
Did you hear that?
They didn't want to accept it.
Yeah. Hey, write about it.
They only like pay attention to it like later.
Yeah,
a few years later, after everyone forgot, so there wouldn't be like any comparisons.
Yeah, definitely do a sort of a composite investigation into how many things have done that in the last while, and put that up on that old magazine.
I don't think it's like they're copying us, but it's funny to think so.
Yeah. Well, you certainly have an argument there. That they would certainly have to volley. They can't just let that drop in their court without a response. I mean, they can, but you know what I mean. All right. Well, y'all, thank you so much. I want to appreciate our participants, Almer Duck, Harmony, and Worm That Walks, also known as Tai That Yangs. Great name. And so we will catch y'all next time. Once again, we try to do this every 2 weeks, so we'll plan to do this in 2 weeks again, Sunday, 12 p.m. CST, typically for an hour or two, just depending on how lively the conversation is. And I think today was a great example of a show. So I appreciate everybody's participation, and I hope to catch you next time. Have a great couple of weeks, and thanks again. We'll see you then.
Yeah, good night, folks.
See ya.
Great show, guys.